Hello everyone, and this is our bonus video for the SSH brute force section, and in this video I will demonstrate how you can install Metasploitable as a virtual machine. Alright, so there are a few things that you need to do. First of all, you need to open up your Google Chrome and type in the Metasploitable name inside of your search bar. Then you should navigate to the first link, which will be the sourceforge.net Metasploitable download. Click on it and simply click on this green download button. It will start downloading this zip file, which is around 800 megabytes large, and once it has finished, then you can extract it to the desktop, or simply just move it to the desktop, create a new folder, call that folder, for example, Metasploitable, paste this zip file into that folder, then we want to extract all of the files inside of this folder that we created. Now this will take a few seconds to finish, and we should receive the metasploitable.vmdk file, which then we will use in order to create our virtual machine with all the vulnerable softwares. Now, the only thing we need from this virtual machine is the SSH client, so once again, if you have any SSH service running on any other machine, you don't really need to do this. You can perform the SSH brute force on any SSH machine that you manage to find, and of course that you have the permission to test on. Alright, so this is finished. We got this file right here, and you will see a couple of files in which we are interested in this Metasploitable file, which is .vmdk. It is the size of 1.79 gigabytes, and right now we need to open up our VirtualBox, click on New, put in a name for your virtual machine. For example, let's call it Metasploit, and make sure that under the type you set Linux, and under the version you set all the way down other Linux 64-bit. Click on Next. 512 megabytes is more than enough for this machine, so click on Next. And instead of going with the create a virtual hard disk now, as we did with the Kali Linux machine, we want to go to the use an existing virtual hard disk file. Click on this, and right here click on this icon, where it will open this video, where you can simply just find your Metasploitable VMDK file and use it as your hard disk. Since I don't have it right here, I want to go to the add, then I want to navigate to the desktop, to the Metasploitable, and then this file, and here it is, the metasploitable.vmdk. Click on open, try to find it right here. Here it is. I will simply just double click on it. It will automatically set it right here, and I will click on create. As soon as that has finished, we also want to set the network settings that we used in the Kali Linux. We also want to set it in the Metasploitable as well, so go to the bridge adapter and set the Ethernet cable connection, and once again make sure cable connected is checked. Click on OK, and now you can start the machine. So I will simply just click on start, and you will notice that this actual machine doesn't take too long to install. It will take just 2 or 3 minutes possibly, and then we are ready to proceed with our brute forcer for the SSH service. Alright, so it says starting up right here. It will automatically download and install all of the stuff and all the softwares that it needs, so we don't really have to do anything. All we need to do is to log into the machine once it has finished installing everything. Alright, so we are going to wait for that to finish, and here it is already over. It is asking us for the login, and you will notice that above the actual login, it tells us that the username and password is msfadmin and msfadmin. So let's go right here and type msfadmin, and as a password as well msfadmin. Clear the screen, since this is just a command line machine, and if I type ifconfig, I make sure that we are in the same local area network with the IP address of 192.168.1.3, and this is basically it. We successfully downloaded and installed Metasploitable virtual machine. So thank you for watching this tutorial, and I will see you in the next lecture. Bye! Hello everybody, and welcome to our third project, which is going to be the SSH brute forcer. So for now on, we managed to scan the open ports to determine which ones were closed, which ones were open. We also managed to scan for the softwares running on those open ports. And now let's imagine an example that we didn't really manage to find any vulnerable software running on those open ports. Well, now we have to turn to different approaches, such as, for example, trying to gain access through some of those services running on those open ports. And we're going to take a look at the first one, which is going to be the SSH brute force. Now, what is an SSH? Well, SSH is a way that you can communicate and control the target machine over the internet just by performing the SSH connection to that specific machine. Now, of course, it is a secure protocol, therefore we would need the username and password in order to gain access to that specific machine over the SSH protocol. Now, for the purposes of this project, we're going to use a virtual machine which is called Metasploitable. Now, I downloaded it and already installed it. Here it is. And in case you don't know how to do that, I created a bonus video which is going to be at the last section of this course, and there you should see the bonus video which simply just shows you how to download and install Metasploitable. Now, I will assume that you already have it and that you watched that video, so I will simply just start this machine. And first of all, we're going to take a look at how we can simply just connect over the SSH using our terminal. And then we're going to try to implement all of that into our SSH brute forcer program. Now, there will be two versions of this program. One will be a regular SSH brute force and the other one will be the SSH brute forcer with threading library. Now, the reason why we do that is because if you use a threading library in order to perform brute forcing, it will automatically be faster than simply just using one thread in order to perform the brute force. But let's not bother ourselves with that right now. Let's see how we can connect to the SSH using our terminal. So our machine is up and running. We log in using the MSF admin as a username and MSF admin as a password. And here it is. Everything works correctly. If I type ifconfig, I will check my IP address, which is going to be 192.168.1.3. So I need to remember that. Open up my terminal. Let me enlarge all of this in. And now try to connect to that IP address using SSH protocol. So SSH and then 192.168.1.3. Press here enter. And here are some of the stuff that happens once you try to connect over the SSH. The authenticity of the host can be established. RSA key fingerprint is, and then this one, are you sure you want to continue connecting? We want to type here yes, and it will tell us that it permanently added the RSA to the list of known hosts. Now, this is just some regular stuff that happens once you try to actually connect to the SSH, and we're going to have to implement some of these things in our program as well, so keep in mind for that right now. And it will ask us to connect to the root account, which we don't really want, so I'm just going to click exit right here. I will control C and then I will SSH MSF admin and then at 192.168.1.3. Okay, and the password will be MSF admin if I'm not mistaken. And here it is. We successfully managed to connect to the MSF admin account on the Metasploitable virtual machine using the SSH from our terminal. Alright, and now if I type ifconfig in this terminal, you will see that we get the exact same IP address as we got when I typed ifconfig inside our Metasploitable. So we basically got something like a reverse shell running, and we can execute any commands we want, and we can do anything onto our Metasploitable machine. So let me exit this, since we are not really interested in doing this over terminal, and let's start a new project on SSH brute forcer. Now, of course, I showed you an example. Let me just open up my PyCharm. Now, of course, I showed you an example in which we actually know the password to the target, and in our program we want to make sure that we do not know the password, and we will try multiple passwords until we actually find the correct one. Okay? And then once we find the correct one, we will print it to the screen, found password, and we will print the username and the password for that specific account. Now, by default, we will probably open up our previous project, which is going to be the vulnerability scanner. Yeah, here it is. But we want to, as usual, create a new project, which we will call the SSH brute forcer. So let's wait for all of this to load up. Okay, so it loaded up. Let's go to the file, new project. Let's name the project to be SSH brute force. Click on create. We want to create and open the new project inside of this window. Let's wait for it to create the virtual environment for us and all the dependencies. And now we can simply just create our Python file by right-clicking, new Python file, and let's call it sshroot.py. Easy to remember, so all we are going to do in this video before we end it is we're going to import the needed libraries for this program to work. Now, let's type the import command, and the first library and the most important library for this actual project is going to be the Paramiko library. We will use this library in order to automate the process of connecting to our SSH client. So this library has already pre-made functions that we can use in order to make this process shorter. Alright? Then we're going to need the sys library, the OS library, the socket library, of course. Every time we actually try to perform some task over the internet, we will most likely use the socket library, and we are also going to use the term color library. Now, you will notice that out of these 5 libraries, 2 are actually red underlined, which means we do not have them installed inside our virtual environment. So let's install them. We already know how to do that. We will open up our terminal inside our PyCharm and type pip3 install, and first let's go with the Paramiko, since Paramiko is essential for this program to work, while as term color we don't really need, but it will make our program look nicer. And we can see it successfully installed Paramiko, and now let's pip3 install term color. Alright, so pip3 install term color, and this will finish in just a second. Here it is. If I exit this terminal and go back to my program, for some reason this is still red underline, not really sure why. Let's start typing something, maybe it will go away. Print. Yeah, it went away, great. So everything is imported successfully, and in the next video we can start off with our brute forcer. Hope I see you in the next lecture, and take care. Bye. Welcome back everyone, and let's continue with the coding of our brute forcer. You will notice right away that we're going to start it rather the same as our vulnerability scanner by prompting the users to input 3 different things that we are going to store into 3 different variables and use throughout our program. Now, 2 of those 3 things are going to be the exact same as in our vulnerability scanner, and the third one is going to be the username for the SSH account. So first thing we're going to prompt to the user is to enter the host, so the actual IP address to the target that they want to connect to. So we're going to type it right here, input, and let's add the plus sign, and then target address, so the user can specify the target address. The second thing that we are going to need is going to be the username for the account that we are trying to brute force, which in our case, if you're using Metasploitable as I am, is going to be MSF admin. Alright, so we're going to input right here, add the plus sign once again, and SSH username. And the last thing that we want to prompt to the user is to input the file, or the file name from which we are going to read the passwords. Alright, so input file, let's call it like that, and we're going to type input, single quotes, plus sign, and then passwords file. Alright, so simple as that. Once the user specifies all of these 3 things, we are ready to start running our program. The first thing that we're going to take a look at is whether the username specified the actual password file correctly, and we're going to do that using the OS library. So we're going to see whether this file actually exists. If it doesn't exist, we're going to print to the user file doesn't exist. Okay, so now in order to actually do that, we're going to use an if statement, and we're going to call the OS library with the path and .exists. Now this os.path.exists will check for a specified path, whether that path simply exists or not. Basically it performs the same thing as its name says. So os.path.exists, and in the brackets we specify the actual path to the file. So in our case that will be input file, and if it equals to false, since this actual function will return true and false, true if the file exists, and false if it doesn't exist. So in this case, if it doesn't exist, we're going to print that file doesn't exist. And we also want to make sure that we add right here /path in case the user specifies path and not just the file name. And then we're going to use the sys library in order to exit the program with number 1. So sys.exit in case that file doesn't exist, so the user can actually rerun the program and specify the correct file. Right now that we did all of this, we need to actually proceed with the main part of the program, which is going to be the comparison of the passwords with the SSH client. So in order to do that, we're going to have to open file first. And to open this passwords file, we simply just use the same thing as from the vulnerability scanner, which is the statement with open, and then we specify the file name. In our case, it is stored inside the input file variable, and then we open it up for reading. Once we do that, we simply create the file descriptor name, which is going to be just file, and then we check all the passwords line by line. So for each line, in file.readlines, and keep in mind that you need to use readline with S, and there is also readline, but readline will only read character one by one, and we want to make sure we use readline, so we read line by line. Alright? Once it reads the line, that line will be a password, and we're going to set it, so password equals line, and that line we want to strip out any character that we don't need. For example, the new line character, we don't really need it inside of this string, so we're going to strip any unnecessary thing and store it in a new variable that we just created, which is going to be called password. Alright? Once we have the password ready to test, then we can simply just try to connect with that password. And in order to do that, we're going to use a function SSH underscore connect with this specified password. Now, you might notice right away that this is red underline. And the reason why this is red underline is because this function doesn't even exist. Now you might be asking, why are we using it if it doesn't exist? Well, we're going to code it in the next video, and inside of this function, we're going to use the Paramiko library in order to automate the SSH connection to the target. Alright, so that would be about it for this tutorial, and I will see you in the next lecture. Bye! Welcome back everyone, and right now we are ready to start coding our SSH connect function. In the previous video we coded all of this, so this is just the base part of the program where we ask for some important information, then we check whether that information is correct, and then we continue with the actual brute forcing. Right now we're going to code the SSH connect function, and let's do it at the beginning of the program. We're going to define it first, define SSH underscore connect. And this function will actually take two parameters. One of them is going to be the password, which we specified right here, and the other one we're going to actually declare right here in the brackets, and we're going to call it code to be equal to 0. What this means when you simply specify code to be equal to 0 is, in case we don't really specify anything as a second parameter right here in this line, that means that this code parameter will automatically be set to 0. Alright? And we want it like that. So let's add two dots right here and start coding the part of the function. First of all, we need to create a variable which is going to be called SSH, and that variable will be equal to paramiko.ssh client. So we're going to use this SSH client function in order to declare this variable, and then we're going to use this variable to set missing host key policy. So this is a long function, as you can see. You can simply just tab it to autocomplete it once the PyCharm outputs it as a possible function to use. So we're going to type SSH set missing host key policy, and right here we need to specify paramiko.autoadd policy, and this is also function. So this is just some basic two lines that we need to set before we try to connect to the SSH client, and right after it comes the connect part, which we will try with the try and except statement. Similar thing that we did with our port scanner, we're going to do right here. We're going to try to connect inside of this try statement, and in the except statement we're going to print that the password was incorrect. Alright, so right here in the try statement we're going to type ssh.connect. We're going to connect onto the host, and keep in mind that the host is this variable right here which stores the IP address that the user specifies. We want to connect over the port 22 because the port 22 is a regular port for the SSH, we want to set the username to be equal to username, which once again is this variable right here. And we want to set the last thing, which is going to be the password, to be equal to password, which we pasted right here as a parameter. So it is going to get stored from here to here. Alright, so this connect function that comes with the Paramico library has 4 parameters: the IP address, the port number, the username, and the password. And this is all that we're going to do right here in the try statement. In the except statement, we're going to check for an error, which is going to be called Paramico authentication exception, which simply just stands for if the password was incorrect, we're going to perform this part of the code. So if the authentication didn't manage to go through, that means we specify the incorrect password, and therefore we're going to set the code parameter, which remember is the second parameter to our function, to be equal to 1. And in the last case, which is going to be another except statement, we're going to set right here except socket error as E. We're going to set the code to be equal to 2. And before I explain this try and except once again, let me just type here ssh.close once we finish everything, and we want to return the code from this function. So let's go through it once again. We declare the SSH client, we add the auto add policy. These are 2 standard lines before we try to connect. Then we try to connect to the target. If we manage to connect with the password, then this second parameter, which is code, will remain 0. If we specify wrong password, the code will be changed to 1. And if there is any error during the connection, for example, we cannot connect to the target because it is offline, then the code will be 2. Therefore, once we return the code and we check it, then we will know which password is correct and which password isn't correct. Alright, so we're going to finish that in the next tutorial. For now on, we got our function ready. And before I finish off this lecture, I will just add right here that the response is going to be equal to SSH connect with the password. The reason for that is, since we are returning the code from our function, we want to store the result inside of a response variable. Therefore, this response variable will contain the value of the code, whether it is 0, 1, or 2. Alright, so simple as that, and let's continue in the next tutorial. Hope I see you there, and take care. Bye. Welcome back. Let's wrap up our program and run it for a test. So, there are a few things that we actually need to finish before we do that. For now on, we got the main part of the program ready, which is the connect function. We used up all of these 4 libraries, and we are just now going to use the term color library as well. And we also managed to open the file, read the password from the file, and now we need to compare the actual code that we return from the response and see whether that password is correct or not. Alright, so the last line is us returning the code and storing it in the response variable. So let's think about what we need to do after it. Well, we need to compare the actual response with 0, 1, and 2. Simple as that. So in the try statement, we're first of all going to compare if response equals to 0. That means, let's check it out first. What 0 means? Well, since 0 is a parameter that is already set by default, or the code is parameter that is already set by default to be equal to 0, and we do not change it if we manage to connect, that means that 0 equals successful connection. So we're going to print found password. Let's print it like this. So inside we are going to add the plus sign, found password, 2 dots, and then let's add the password as a string. And let's also add for which account we managed to find the password. So for account. And then let's also add plus username. Alright. And let me just move this a little bit to the side so everything can fit inside of our screen. And now there is the part where we can use the term color library, and what term color library allows us to do is to print the statements in different colors. That's what I meant when I mentioned that it is not needed inside of this program, but it will make it look a little bit prettier. So inside of the print statement, we're going to define term color and then dot colored, which is the actual function that we need to use. Open up two brackets right here. And in the first bracket, we're going to type the actual print statement, which is this thing. Let us go to the side. So here we close the first bracket, then we need to add the comma, and in between the single quotes, here we specify in which color we want to print. Let's say we want to print in green color, as we successfully managed to connect, so it will be green. And then we need to close the first bracket, which is going to be the bracket to the term color function, and now the second bracket, which is going to be the bracket to the print statement. So let's check if we have the right amount of brackets. One bracket, two bracket, three brackets, and three close brackets. All right, so everything seems to be good. Now let's go down here. If we manage to find the password, let me just move this so we can see entire code. If we manage to find the password, then we can break out of this program. Since we don't really need to test anymore, we managed to find it. In case we don't manage, which will be the else if statement, or else if response equals to 1, then we will simply just print incorrect login, and we're going to add the password so we can see which password is incorrect. And the last case, which is if the response is equal to 2, then we're going to print simply just, let's print it like this, and let's print can't connect as an error, so we didn't manage to connect, possibly the target is offline. And after it we want to sys exit the program. Since we didn't manage to connect, there is nothing really more to test right here. And after it, as the except statement, we want to print any other exception in case there is some exception that we didn't cover, such as connection, wrong password, or didn't manage to connect. We want to print it right here, so except exception as E. We want to print that exception, so print E, and then we can pass. Since this actual exception can occur only in one password, therefore we don't really want to break out of the program. We want to print that exception and possibly go on to the next password. Okay, so this is the entire program. Let's see if there is anything that we didn't code. Let's delete this empty space right here. We used up all of the libraries that we imported. This is the part of the program where we check for the password, and this is the actual connection part of the program. Alright, so let's test it up. We're going to open up our terminal, enlarge everything so we can see it better. And before we actually test it, you might notice that we're missing one thing, and that thing is going to be the passwords list. Now, once again, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to create a small password list with around 10 passwords. But if you were to perform our real-life attack, you would actually use a lot bigger password with possibly tens of thousands or hundreds of thousand passwords and see which one is correct if you manage to find it. Now, of course, in the bonus videos, I will leave a video where I will show you where you can actually download some of the bigger password lists that are used for real-life attacks. But right now, we're going to test it on a small password list that we're going to create. So let's go right here, right-click. Oops, right-click right here, new, and we want, well, we don't want that. We want to go once again, new file, just a regular file, and let's call it passwords.txt. And let's add some random passwords, such as, for example, hello world, 123, 54321, password 123. Let's type in another password, test 4321. Let's add a real password right now so we can see whether it works, which is MSF admin. And let's add two more passwords. So root and root 123. Why not? So we have around 9 passwords. So let's add one more so we can circle it to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And this is our password list. All right, so let's test our program. We have our terminal open. We zoomed everything in. Now let's go to the PyCharm. Let's go to the SSH brute force. And right here, we want to run the sshbroot.py. So Python 3 sshbroot.py. We have somewhere invalid syntax, so let's see where that is. File.readlines. This is somewhere down here. For line in file.readlines, and at the end of the for statement we need to specify 2 dots. Therefore this didn't work. Let's test it once again. Target address, we specify 192.168.1.3, and once again, in order to check out the IP address of your target machine, you simply just type ifconfig inside of your Metasploitable, and you will get the inet address right here, which is 192.168.1.3 in my case. In your case, it will most likely be something different, so don't specify the same thing right here. Okay, so now that you specify this, press enter. The SSH username for the Metasploitable is msfadmin. Now, you can perform this attack if you want to practice after this on a root account on Metasploitable with a big password list that you can download online and see whether you can crack the root SSH account on the Metasploitable. So SSH username, msfadmin, and passwords file will be passwords.txt. Press here enter, and let's see whether this will work. As you can see, first password is incorrect, second password incorrect, third and fourth are also incorrect, and let's see what happens once we get to the msfadmin. And here it is, found password msfadmin for account msfadmin. Then it exited out of the program because there is no point in testing out other passwords. So all we need to do in order to fix this, so it can look a little bit prettier, is we want to print right here, right after the input file, we want to print the new line characters so we can differentiate the input parameters that we specify from the actual passwords that it tests. So print \n, and let's run it once again right here, clear 192.168.1.3 msfadmin and passwords.txt. Here it is, new line character is there, and it will perform the exact same task as it did previously. Now, you might notice that this is going a little bit slow, and that is something that we will fix in the next video, as we're going to see how we can import threading library inside of this program to make it brute force the passwords faster. Because in real life attacks, if you for example had 100,000 passwords, this would take a long time to actually library, something that we previously. \n, and let's run it once again right here, clear 192.168.1.3 msfadmin and passwords.txt. Here it is, new line character is there, and it will perform the exact same task as it did previously. Now, you might notice that this is going a little bit slow, and that is something that we will fix in the next video, as we're going to see how we can import threading library inside of this program to make it brute force the passwords faster. Because in real life attacks, if you for example had 100,000 passwords, this would take a long time to actually brute force, and you don't really want to sit for a week waiting for 100,000 passwords to finish. You want to finish it as fast as possible. So we're going to take a look at that in the next tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the threading part of this section. Take care. Bye. This lecture where we are going to take a look at the code of how we can make our SSH brute forcer work faster by using thread library. Alright, so here is the code, and the reason why we are not going to code it ourselves is because it is rather similar to the first program that we coded in the previous few videos. There are just some minor changes, as well as adding some libraries that we are going to need. So let's start off from the beginning. Well, first of all, there are two different libraries that we had to import next to these four. Those two are time library and threading library. Both of these libraries belong to the default Python libraries, so there is no need for you to actually install them in your virtual environment, as they're already there. Right after it, at the beginning of the program, we declare a stop flag variable. And this variable is going to be of use to us once we get to the actual threading part. So, for now on, we simply just declare a variable, and it will be an integer value of 0. in our SSH connect function, we make a few minor changes, such as, for example, we declare that we are going to use the global stop flag variable inside of this function. Then we perform the same two things that we performed in the regular brute forcer. After it, we try to connect, and if we manage to connect, then we set the stop flag to be equal to 1. Then after it, we print that the password was found, and in any other case, we will print incorrect login, and we will close the SSH connection. Now let's get to the part where we actually set the stop flag variable to be equal to 1. Why do we do that? Well, if we go all the way down, all of these things are the same as in the previous program. Right here I just added a print statement that says starting threaded SSH brute force, and below there we open the file for passwords, and if we go to the passwords.txt file, you will notice that I added a few more passwords right here, around 150, so we can see how fast it will brute force. The correct password is somewhere around here, and let's continue with the program. So we go into the for loop and we read password by password or line by line, and if stop flag is equal to 0, then we will join all threads and exit the program. And the threads that we create are actually down here. Okay, so let's not pay attention to this part of the code at the moment. So for each password, we perform the strip function onto that password so we can get rid of all the unnecessary characters. Then we create a thread object, which is going to be called T. We perform the actual thread object and the thread function onto the SSH connect function, and that is the first parameter to this thread function. So the target is the actual function that you're going to perform the thread on, and the args are the arguments to that function. So in our case, that is just one argument, which is the password parameter. And this comma right here has to be there, even though we don't have a second parameter, otherwise this will not work, so we have to add it right here. Right after we create the thread object and we call it onto the target of SSH connect with the arguments of password, then we can start that thread and we can sleep for 0.5 seconds after every time we start a thread. Alright? So what this will do is it will start the thread each time a new password is being read from the file, and each password will have its own thread. And in case the stop flag gets switched to 1, well, that means that some of those threads actually manage to find the correct password as they manage to connect to the target. Therefore, we set the flag to be equal to 1, and once the flag is set to 1, that means that we can close the program since we found the correct password. Therefore, we perform the t.join function, which will join all the threads that we're running, and then we can exit the program. And that is the entire program that runs on threads. So let's see whether it is faster than the previous one. First, I'm going to go and enlarge this. Then I will navigate to the PyCharm and then SSH brute force. And first we will run the previous program. So the previous program had no threading library. And let's see how that one will do. So the target address is 192.168.1.3 in my case. The SSH username is msfadmin. And the passwords file is password or passwords.txt. Press here enter. It will start running. We can see we got some incorrect logins. And you can see each password takes around 1 second to finish. Therefore, this is going rather slow. So let's just Control-C this so we don't wait for the correct password. And if we run the second program, which is our threaded brute forcer, and type in the same information, it will start our threaded brute forcer, and you will see that the passwords go a lot faster than before. As you can see, we already managed to cover more than 20 passwords, and here it is. Here is the correct password. And a few seconds after that, it closes the program. Now the reason why it goes for few more passwords after finding the correct password is because all of these passwords were separate threads that were ran before this one has finished. Therefore, it had to finish these ones first and then exit the program. And you can see how many passwords we managed to actually cover in just a matter of a second or two, and it also managed to find the correct password. Now the reason why incorrect passwords are printed in red is because I also added a print statement somewhere around here, which says that we print the incorrect password in red color by using termColor.colored function, which we already covered before. That's basically it for this SSH brute forcer. I hope you enjoyed this section as well as the previous two. And this was also some type of a recap video to this brute forcer. Therefore, we're not going to do a recap video as a next lecture. We're going to go straight into the next project. So hope you enjoyed this one once again, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye.